Hello and welcome to Keep Right On, a Birmingham City podcast brought to you from us here at Birmingham Live. I'm Brian Dick and I'm joined as ever by my colleague and co-host Alex Dicken, fresh from a deep freeze at Cambridge United's Abbey Stadium, but also a surprisingly pleasant cheeseburger, I understand. Alex, how are you?
Good, thank you, Brian. Yeah, the food offered at Cambridge is pretty nice. We found at the end of last season as well. So fair play to them, because not all League One, League Two clubs provide refreshments to the media.
And a slightly more surprise entity, an away victory as well.
Yeah, first since October. It was only against a high-flying League Two team, two leagues below Blues, obviously. But I suppose progression over perfection was the thing I tried to draw upon in my post-match analysis, because it was never going to be brilliant because the pitch wasn't fantastic, but Blues played the conditions well. They created enough chances to win the game and held on at the end. So all in all, a good evening's work, and thankfully the game wasn't postponed.
Just to lay the table a little bit, which I probably should have done before we started talking about cheeseburgers, we'll just pick the bones out of the FA Cup win at Cambridge, look ahead to the draw, analyse the current state of Birmingham City's squad, which will inevitably lead us on to talking about the transfer window, which seems to have burst into life in the last 36, 48 hours, with Girona's John Solis and Mialbi's Abdoulaye Manneh both linked with Blues, and also obviously some players expected to move on as well. So before we come to that, Alex, I suppose the big takeaway is, were you on the pitch when Kyogo scored?
I wasn't, and to be fair, the fans weren't either. So a little bit like Luka Djukovic last season, they're kind of all talk, weren't they? They should have been on there.
We can't be seen to be encouraging pitching.
No, we can't. It was a great finish. And to be fair, for me, I mean, I'd written my intro after that goal with Blues 2-0 up at half time, because it was always going to be Kyogo's night after 5 months without a goal. Took it really well, pounced on the defender's loose touch, streaked away before producing a really, really good finish into the corner. So hopefully, as Chris Davies said afterwards, he can take that confidence into league fixtures now and break that duck too.
That is the goal that we expected from Kyogo, wasn't it? It was the high turnover. It wasn't that high. It was on the halfway line. But the turnover, sort of surprising a defender with his pace to close down, win the ball. And then I think the most gratifying point of it was that he had a lot of yards to cover, and a lot of time, more importantly, to think about what he was going to do with the ball. But this time, for whatever reason, because we've seen it in the past where he hasn't been as cool-headed, this time he seemed to manage himself and work the ball into a position where, it was a very, very neat finish. Do you expect it to be the catalyst?
I think it has to be. I don't think we can say expect, because Kyogo scored a goal before, didn't he, in the cup against Sheffield United, and then went 22 more league games without scoring. So I don't think we can say expect, but the way he approached the box before that finish, I think he looked like a player with conviction. I can't claim to be a body language expert, but he looked like a player who was going to take that chance. Whereas we've seen in the last 2 or 3 months him going in similar positions in league games, and I've never been fully convinced at all that he's going to take those chances. So there seemed to be a shift in him. Whether that was the confidence of playing against a League Two team, I don't know, but hopefully it has to be really the start of better form in the league. We're not saying Kyogo's got to score 12, 15 goals between now and the end of the season, but he has got to be a contributor of some goals for Birmingham City to give them that option off the bench or as a starter.
Yeah, he at least didn't seem to wilt, did he? We've seen times in the past where he's gone through and, barely made contact with the ball, or, the contact he has made has been poor, or, the best goal, the times he has scored, it's been disallowed. So, yeah, I suppose what you would say and what Chris Davies would say would be he's going to get more chances as long as he continues to do his work off the ball. And this was very much a case, wasn't it, of, winning the turnover through closing players down. And whether championship defenders will be quite as sluggish on the ball as what happened on Saturday might be different. But we have seen him win turnovers in the championship as well. And it is just that finishing point, because undoubtedly Blues need somebody to pick up the mantle in from the goal scoring point of view, don't they? And quite frankly, with the money they've spent on him and invested in him, with that contract, the onus is on Kyogo to be that man, undoubtedly. I mentioned talking about the transfer window towards the end of the pod, but while we're on Kyogo, we'll do that now. Martin O'Neill said before the match, didn't he, that he understood that Kyogo wanted to prove himself at Blues. Do you think that's right? Do you think that's just sort of managing the narrative a little bit? They've tried for him and not got him. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I mean, on Thursday, it kind of all came out that the Celtic were back in for Kyogo and wanted to take him back to Scotland. And obviously, me looking at that, I thought, oh, you know what, that probably makes sense for the player if he's not going to play much at Blues between now and the end of the season, to go back to Celtic, whether it's on loan or a permanent transfer, and rediscover his form and give himself a chance of making the Japan World Cup squad. But quite quickly, when it was put to Chris Davies in his press conference, he kind of, killed it really and said that there's not been any discussions about letting Kyogo leave, and that he's very much their player. Obviously, things can always change in a transfer window. Could something go on with Blues bringing another player in to push Kyogo a little bit further down the pecking order? That is still possible. But then it was, to back up what Chris Davies has said, Martin O'Neill later said about, that they were under the impression, as he just said, Brian, that Kyogo wanted to stay at Blues and prove himself. And, I think we saw that come out a little bit against Cambridge, in that Kyogo had the chance and seemed intent on scoring in that game, had a second chance early in the second half and almost took that one and looked like a player who was full of confidence again. So I think, if Blues go and sign, a strike of £5 million in the next 2 weeks, then maybe there'll be that question mark over Kyogo again, because his chances will become limited. But for now, it does seem like, all parties are kind of the same belief that Kyogo is going to stay at Blues for the rest of this season, at least. It's
all too much resource to have sat on the bench, isn't it? That said, if someone comes in, Celtic are absolutely adamant they want Kyogo, and they're willing to cover all of his wages. Personally, I'd be giving that some thought. I'm afraid. My preferred outcome is that Kyogo stays and finds the form and does finish the season, even with 7 or 8 goals. Championship goals, that would be good given what's gone on at the first half of the season. That is my preferred option. But similarly, I would find it tough to just dismiss out of hand any inquiry that worked for the club from a financial point of view.
Yeah, if they've got the option of having another striker in, somebody, and I look at, if they are going to sign another striker before the end of the window, I want that player to come in and be a starter. I don't want that player to come in and be competing with Marvin Duksh and Jay Stansfield to play in the front two. I think that player has to be a starter. It has to elevate the team. And that will, of course, push Kyogo further down the pecking order. Well, at least the version of Kyogo that we've seen in the first 6 months of this season. If we suddenly start seeing the player who scored all those goals for Celtic and was, the player who signed for £10 million 12 months ago, then fair enough. That's a different version of Kyogo. But if that other player comes in, I would struggle to see him getting many chances between now and the end of the season. Particularly, maybe 10 minutes here or there, but in terms of starts, I would really struggle to see him getting the chances. So, if he does still harbour hopes of playing for Japan at the World Cup, which I believe he does, then maybe that would be best for him to go elsewhere and play football.
Yeah, right. We're in danger of stealing our own thunder here. Let's go back to Cambridge. We've talked about Kyogo. That was the headline, as you mentioned. Anyone else impress you?
I'm trying to think. I thought Tommy Doyle was probably, for me, the best player on the pitch. I know Kyogo got man of the match, but as it was always going to be Kyogo's night. Tommy Doyle was the player who looked to get Blues moving through the thirds. It wasn't the best pitch in the world. It was quite bubbly, not as bad as it was when Blues played there at the end of last season, but it wasn't a good pitch. And Doyle was the player who kind of seemed to adapt to it better than anyone else. Kai Wagner, almost said Tom Wagner then. Kai Wagner, that's definitely going to happen at some stage. Kai Wagner, I thought was useful again. Distribution wasn't as good as it was against Coventry for me, but he still provided a goal. In his first 2 Blues games, he got an assist and a goal from left back, and got through 90 minutes, which is in this mini pre-season for him is very important. So he is looking like an astute piece of business, but still we're only 2 games in. I don't want to, jump the gun and say that he is absolutely fantastic, because we've not seen enough of him yet, and we've been burned by previous signings in the past, haven't we? So, but the signs with Kai Wagner look very good.
Yeah, indeed. Doyle's pass forward for the assist for Dutch's goal, that to me smacked of a player a central midfielder who likes to pass the ball forward, isn't it? And that's absolutely what Blues need. Anyone who didn't take their opportunity, go on.
whether it was an opportunity, but he came off the bench, Phil Neumann, and seemed to, send panic through the rest of the defence. He was obviously beaten in the build-up to Cambridge's first goal, and then, had the chance to clear it and inadvertently passed it straight to Sully Kaikai to sweep home the first for them. And I think he was giving away free kicks and didn't look overly comfortable. It was obviously a big ask for him to come on late in a game, because it was a niggle that Jack Robinson had that he obviously didn't want to take a chance with. So he had to be introduced pretty swiftly, and it just didn't look like he was getting up to the speed of the game quickly enough. And he struggled. And if you look at that now, Neumann came in, with the big reputation. Blues worked really hard to sign him. He's probably going to be fourth choice by the end of this transfer window, because it's quite clear now that Jack Robinson has edged ahead of him in the pecking order over Christmas. Chris Davies is always going to play Christoph Clara. So if they sign a new centre-back, I'm led to believe they are looking at left-footed centre-backs, then that player's come into play, I think. So you've got Clara and the new guy, Robinson probably next cab off the rank, and then Neumann as fourth choice, and you can't see him playing much between now and end of the season, really.
Right. I wasn't expecting you to write his obituary just yet.
Things can change, because we were writing Jack Robinson's obituary in November and October, weren't we? So things can change, but I just, it hasn't worked, has it? And he hasn't looked. I think as this season has gone on, I think Neumann has got worse, if anything. I think it peaked in October with that game at Preston, and then gradually those performance levels have just dipped again. I don't think he'll get many more chances.
Right. You just want someone with an athlete of that sort of physical caliber. You want the performances to be more assertive, don't you? Basically. Yeah, absolutely. I'm always concerned by Robinson's sort of stature. He's not the biggest to play centre half. How did he do with Louis Appere, who is a League Two target man?
Yeah, I thought he did okay, to be honest. He gave the ball away once in the first half. He shored things up a little bit, and he looked solid enough. I think, Clara wasn't perfect in possession alongside him either. It was, as I said, it was a difficult pitch. I will judge them probably a little bit more harshly against Swansea when the pitch conditions are much better and they've actually got to play against Championship forwards. I thought Robinson did okay while he was on the field. They didn't concede a goal while he was on the field, so that's always a positive sign.
Alex, do we need to talk about James Beadle?
Well, we weren't going to, were we, Brian? To be fair, before we had a little look at the highlights package before we came on air, and probably both arrived at the conclusion that he might have done better with at least the second goal, I would say.
Well, interestingly, when you said I thought he could have done better with the goal, instantly the first goal came to my mind, and yes, we're absolutely pinning that goal on Neumann, but it's not the most firmly struck shot, and it does seem to go close-ish to him. That said, I haven't seen the angle from from the back post across Beadle, but it did seem to go close to him. And then you meant the second goal, didn't you? Where you felt he was. I mean, it was reasonably well hit, but what did you think he did wrong there?
My angle inside the ground was said that was an excellent strike, and that I couldn't pin it on James Beadle. I just thought it was a good strike, but I watched the highlights back, and with a better angle, it just looked like Beadle had jumped underneath the shot. And yes, it did come through a lot of bodies. Kaikai's shot from about 18 yards or so, but it does look like he's kind of jumped underneath the ball. And I'm no goalkeeper. I've never been a goalkeeper. I'm no expert on goalkeeping, so I'm probably not the best placed person to comment. But it looked like if he stood his ground or didn't go to ground, then he probably would have been able to save it. And that goal did put a lot of pressure on Blues, really, in those final few minutes with Cambridge hurling the ball back into their box. So I felt like that was one maybe he could have done better with. I would absolve him of blame for the first one, to be fair. I just think it's quite close to him, and it's difficult to get down, I suppose, when Kai swept it in. So I would absolve him of blame for that one, but I think maybe he could have done better for the second.
I think what we spoke about when he joined in the summer was some of the clips we'd seen of the England under-21s, and often when a shot would come in, he'd sort of deflect the ball back out towards, into the danger zone again, and that's continued to be a concern for me.
Yeah, I mean, that's a modern goalkeeping thing, isn't it? I think more and more young goalkeepers do tend to do that. I think it's the areas that Beadle's putting the ball into, though. He puts it largely, right in front of him, and the defenders have to react quickly. And when the defenders don't react quickly, I can think back to Southampton when Phil Neumann didn't react quickly, and Adam Armstrong reacted to prod home the all-important third goal. It's a problem, isn't it? For what it's worth, Chris Davies told me quite early on in the window that, or maybe even before the window started, that they weren't looking to bring in a new goalkeeper because they were quite happy with the two options they've got in Beadle and Ryan Allsop. And he kind of reaffirmed that after the Coventry game last week, saying that he's happy with Beadle. He sees him get around the goal really well in training. He's convinced that he's going to be a top goalkeeper. And, even actually suggested maybe looking ahead towards the summer that, they could have a conversation with Brighton about making it a permanent deal.
Right,
but,
okay.
which I thought at the time, I don't know how receptive Brighton would be to that, because Beadle is rated as the best young goalkeeper in the country, isn't he? But it hasn't been the perfect loan to me. I think we both in the summer that we would have liked Blues to have gone for the kind of ready-made, experienced championship goalkeeper, somebody who could come in and you could straight away put some distance between themselves and Ryan Allsop and say, here's a clear number one, here's a more than capable number two, and go from there. Whereas in Beadle, they've got a young goalkeeper for another club who is still developing and is still making some errors. And they haven't been that costly this season, I don't think, the errors that he has made. And he has made some very good saves, I must add. But I don't think it's been the perfect loan from a Blues perspective. Yes, Beadle's getting all the experience he probably wants, but Blues haven't quite got the reliable goalkeeper that they needed. Yeah,
I don't know if I'm ideologically opposed to the whole concept of a lone goalkeeper. I suspect I am. But yeah, I'm not a fan of the two number ones because if you've got two, I'm going to take you to the NFL here again, and the old saying is that if you've got two quarterbacks, you haven't got any. As in, if there's any debate as to who is the first choice, then clearly one of them isn't doing the job to the requisite standard. I feel that a little bit with goalkeepers, that it shouldn't be a massively close competition. And for me, all the goalkeeping experts will say you look at Beadle's footwork, you look at his save percentage, and when I say footwork, I mean in terms of getting his feet underneath him so he can spring rather than playing with the ball at his feet. I think he has got decent footwork, but for me, I don't know. There's a massive difference between him and Ryan Allsop. There's aspects of Allsop's game that I like more, if I'm honest. In terms of the playing with personality and the distribution, I think is probably better. But yeah, that Beadle to Blues or permanently in the summer is a different discussion, or a discussion for another day, isn't it?
Yeah.
Do you want to slate anybody else before we move on?
No, I think we've gone far off the squad at this point, haven't we? No, move on.
No, okay, let's move on. So this is going to age terribly, but I'll ask you the question anyway. Who do you fancy in the next round? I think it's easy to say who we don't fancy, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, we looked at the list before we came on. I mean, I think what is it? We're in the last 32 now. I think probably 28 of the 31 teams I don't fancy.
They're all a bit meh,
for,
weren't they?
Yeah, for various reasons, really. I don't really want any championship teams. I don't really want any of the lower league clubs left in it, which means Premier League tie, hopefully. I'd like one at home. If you could kind of rekindle what we had last year against Newcastle, that would be nice. So maybe not Newcastle, obviously, because you don't want them again, but a home tie against a big Premier League club. I'm thinking, I was looking at Arsenal and Chelsea. I think that'd be nice at St Andrews. You get a sellout, you get a similar atmosphere to what we had last year. That'd be a night to savour, hopefully, if Blues could perform.
Yeah, and again, a yardstick to see where the current vintage are in terms of where they're trying to get to. For me, it would be about grounds I haven't been to. So Grimsby away. I mean, obviously, they've knocked Manchester United out of a.
Have you been to Cambridge, Brian?
I have been to Cambridge, yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Because Brian did offer to join me at Cambridge last week, and then all of a sudden, when the weather got rough, he dropped out last minute. So yeah.
Yeah. Now I don't know whether I'm going to tell this story, so I won't even mention it. But yeah, I did take my wife to a Cambridge United game on her birthday several years ago. So yeah, let's brush over that. There's one team I don't want, and it's them lot up the road, because in my experience of games against them in recent years, it just sucks so much energy out of the season. It becomes a black hole of just focus and as I say, energy and attention. The games either side of it just seem to get sucked into this black hole of, we've got a local derby on the horizon. So anything but that for me, basically. Victories against an away win against Cambridge, for whatever that's worth, against League Two opposition. A home win against Coventry. Have Blues turned a corner, can we say?
Difficult to say. I'll take more from Swansea, I think.
Okay. Reserving judgment for now.
Yeah, Coventry was an interesting one because they didn't play the way they usually play. They kind of
25% possession. Yeah.
Well, yeah, they were just kind of almost old school in that they were doing the basics right. They were combative. They were physical. They were getting after Coventry at every opportunity, but they weren't really prioritising possession. They obviously tried to be good with it, but they largely allowed Coventry to have the ball and tried to hit them on the counter and be dangerous when they had it, which they were. Cambridge, very difficult pitch. They kind of got 3-0 up, and I was wondering how they'd got 3-0 up, because I don't think they'd played brilliantly. They'd just been very clinical when those chances came. Kai Wagner's was a deflected shot from the edge of the box. Kyogo's was a goal that he made all for himself, a goal out of nothing really. And then obviously Cambridge messed up playing out from the back, and Blues punished them ruthlessly.
Yeah, so, to be fair, that is what Blues try and do. So we can give them that third goal.
Yeah, that is. But I can't really. I mean, again, a League Two opposition. You're a little bit kind of. I'm loath to use that as a kind of barometer of where Blues are at. I will look at Swansea, and decent Championship team who've really improved since changing managers. To be fair, as well, I'll use that more, and hopefully Blues can have a couple more bodies in by then to give themselves a better bench, because the bench at Cambridge looked pretty bad. Yeah,
indeed. Let's go straight onto that then. It was pretty thin, wasn't it? Williamson, Fujimoto, Neumann, Samstead were the senior players amongst the substitutes. A lot of the youngsters on there. I know there was some hope that some of the younger players might actually get on the field. That didn't happen, because I think when Chris Davies might even have been thinking about that, they kind of lost control of the game, didn't they? But yeah, it's, as you've mentioned, you've mentioned the squad. Threadbare might be overstretching it a little bit, but it is limited with the injuries they've got. Inevitably, the transfer market is now open. So, just thoughts about that situation, about the squad, and the fact that they can now improve it or deepen it.
Yeah, it's injuries and omissions, really, isn't it, Brian? Yeah. Because there are players there that could quite easily have been used against Cambridge, or were involved in the last couple of games that Chris Davies hasn't opted to use. In the case of Mark Leonard, Lyndon Dykes, two experienced players who've been good squad players over the last 18 months, and obviously look to be on their way out. So yeah, I mean, I don't know how they've kind of got into this situation so suddenly, where the squad looks so threadbare, because a month or two ago we'd have been saying, so and so is unlucky to be left off the bench this week. Our poor Kanya Fujimoto, 21st man, can't get in the squad, and now all of a sudden he's one of the players that Chris Davies is turning to, and he hasn't done that all season. So you can, put two and two together and suggest that he probably wouldn't want to. So they do need players through the door, and it looks like they are going to get a couple this week who will help Chris Davies going into that Swansea fixture and give him some options off the bench because they really need them. You look around the Championship and the teams that Blues are playing, and they all look stronger at the moment, I would say, squad-wise. And I actually thought that was a real strength of Blues early this season, that they had a squad. I wouldn't say they had the best 11 in the Championship. They definitely didn't, but they had a very good squad which had depth that could compete with most. Whereas now, it is pretty thin on the ground.
Yeah, they had viable bodies, didn't they? Until they didn't. Yeah, absolutely. So let's go on to the transfer window. A couple of the names that are being extensively linked. Abdoulaye Manneh, who is we'll talk about him, but he's seems to be quite close to coming from the Swedish club Mjällby, and John Solis, who is at Spanish outfit, defensive midfielder, Spanish outfit Girona. Understanding of those two situations as we speak, obviously, again, this will age quite quickly.
Yeah, Manneh was linked throughout last week as well, wasn't he? There were a few rumours about him, and we kind of were of the understanding that Blues were in for him, and there were a few other clubs, to be fair. And that one looks to be nearing, edging close to completion. A winger would give Blues, or a winger inside 10.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in there.
Yeah.
I've been watching his clips. And this comes with the Kyogo Furuhashi rider that don't take too much from YouTube packages.
It's all we have at the moment with these two players, though, isn't it?
Yeah, but have to concede, it's probably not news to anybody. I'm not a season ticket holder at Mjällby. But looking at the clips, it does look like he takes up central positions rather than hugs the touchline. And a colleague of ours spoke to a Mjällby blogger, because Coventry City looked like they were going to nip in and take the 21-year-old just a couple of months ago, and he referred to Manneh playing very much as the left of two number 10s in a 3-4-2-1 situation, and the clips certainly do back that up, don't they? He does appear in central positions more than he does out wide.
Yeah, he seems to pop up all over the place, doesn't he? He doesn't look the fastest player in the world, but he looks like someone who's got a decent burst of acceleration. He's got a good physique and put his body in good positions and use it well. Looks like he's got very good feet, very creative, has got a decent shot on him as well from what we've seen. But crucially for me, he's young, and both these players we're going to talk about are young, and I've mentioned it on a few podcasts and right since the summer, that I wasn't particularly, enthusiastic about the age profile of the players that Blues have been signing. And he's 21 years old. He's had a lot of clubs looking at him over the last 12 months. I think he was almost out the door to Olympiacos at one stage, wasn't he? So
that's right.
A good age at 21, player who's got plenty of room for development, and somebody who might be willing to come in and learn from a Damari Gray or a Patrick Robertson, won't be absolutely itching to be in the starting 11 every week, and Chris Davies can use him how and when he sees fit. An exciting signing, but again, one that we don't know loads about, and one that I'm sure supporters probably won't know loads about either. So we're probably going to have to watch him in the flesh before we can make a better judgment.
We absolutely are. And I think what I would say about those clips is what doesn't come across is the standard of opposition. He's a player that likes to have a few touches, and he looks to have very good feet, and he can work himself out of a phone box, but the Championship phone boxes are very, very tight, aren't they? And you can end up with your feet above your head fairly quickly if you take too many liberties in the middle of a Championship midfield. So it'll be interesting to see if that apparent talent and technicality translates to the Championship. He carries the ball well, and he runs beyond. I've seen him pop up in positions similar to the ones that John Terrell used to take up, in terms of being the furthest man forward. So that's encouraging. And his distribution seems pretty good as well. He seems to get his head up and pass the ball forward. Maybe not like a Dan Crowley who's seemed to be looking at his feet a lot of the time, and never really released teammates. Manneh seems to be able to do that as well. But, again, referred to the value of YouTube clips. I think if we think about the last player that sort of joined Blues from the Swedish top tier was Karim Marabti. And again, he was a good player, but, having done well in the Swedish top flight, he didn't do brilliantly in the Championship. So, we've got to see this guy play for Blues before we can make any judgments. But, some exciting raw materials to work with there. John Solis, we've mentioned. John, John. I always enjoy that spelling. Seems to be a Colombian thing. He's very much a solid and quite a physically imposing 6-stroke central midfielder, isn't he?
Yeah, I'm encouraged by this one, to be honest. I think this one, out of the two, I think the John Solis will be maybe more ready for the Championship.
Yeah, higher floor. Yeah, absolutely, potentially.
You look at his background. He's obviously played in Colombia for Atletico Nacional and came through there very young, and he's gone over to Girona in La Liga, and that does seem to be a pathway, doesn't it, into Europe for South Americans and Colombian players to go over into La Liga, where the language is obviously the same and there's no barrier, and he's played a lot of football, really. Not massively been a starting player for Girona, who have been a very capable team in La Liga over the last 4 or 5 seasons. They're, obviously a sister club of Manchester City, part of City Group, have been in the Champions League, and Solis has played in the Champions League for them. And yeah, from what we can see, he's a well-built central midfield player, someone who can play as a 6 in Blue system, or maybe a little bit further forward as an 8. He can carry the ball. He looks like kind of a slightly taller version of a Chris Davies midfield player, in that he likes to get the ball from the defenders and turn on it and play forward. He can turn really well. He's got great feet, looks good technically. And because of where he's come from, I think he is someone that could hopefully be ready to make an immediate impact. And Blues do need that, because they need an option in central midfield. They've obviously got Tomoki Iwata, who's been playing it right back for the last few months. And I don't think that will change. I think Iwata will, until maybe Ethan Laird is back. I think Iwata is probably still going to be the first choice right back in this team. And that leaves them with just Peck and Tommy Doyle as midfield players. And although that is a fabulous midfield technically, when it's on song, I do think Blues need a more physical option away from home, somebody who can compete a little bit better. They've lost 9 of 13 league games away from St Andrews. It's quite clear that something needs to change. And when Iwata has been in there, they have looked more solid because of his physicality. So with him not being able to do that, they need another option. And Solis does look like a player who could do that.
Yeah, you need to earn the right to play, don't you? I think that's the one thing that's become apparent very much in the Championship this season. That said, I don't think Solis has started a La Liga game since getting on for September, or if he has, it might only be one. And there would be a period of adjustment as well. So hitting the ground running might be a nice thing to say, but, the proof will be in the pudding. But yeah, definitely an exciting one. How developed is that? I think the last update we had was something from Fabrizio Romano saying that that negotiation during the final stages between Blues and Girona. So we'll see how that goes. Moving on to the players that are currently in the squad. You've already mentioned Mark Leonard and Lyndon Dykes, Fujimoto as well, and obviously Lewis Koumas is on loan, and we wonder if the Manneh situation might affect what happens with Koumas. Any thoughts or updates on Leonard? I see you've put something out today about Mark Leonard.
Yeah, as kind of you expect, really, interest is growing in Mark Leonard. Of all the players that Blues have got available, he, at 24 years old, with the kind of the game history Leonard's got, he's probably the most in demand, I think. There's obviously plenty of room for development there. St Truden in Belgium, who are third place team in that league, have shown interest and inquired about Leonard as well. There is interest in the MLS, I believe, as well. An unnamed club over there have inquired about him too. There are Championship inquiries pending, and basically a lot of League One interest, although I'm told he has no interest in going back to League One. So it looks like it's going to be kind of one of the other destinations. I think the preference would be to remain in the Championship. Whether Blues would allow that on a loan deal, I'm not so sure. It is looking likely that it will be a loan rather than a permanent at this stage, unless a team could foot very good money. And I'm told it would take, over $1.5 million for Blues to part ways with him this month, because he's still got 2.5 years left in his contract. So I think a loan probably looks more likely. I think that's probably a better idea for Blues, because
I hope so. Because I don't feel that the Mark Leonard story has been written yet in Birmingham City, or not been finished yet for me with Birmingham City. I still think there's room for development. And he's, to my mind, yes, the opportunities he's got. I think the knock's always been, he hasn't quite made the most of that opportunity. But it's hard, isn't it, if you're only getting one start every 10 games, or whatever the stats are. It's difficult to sort of grasp that opportunity. So yeah, for me, there's still runway left in Mark Leonard's career, I feel.
Yeah, and to be fair, Brian, the picture in the midfield could look very different in the summer, couldn't it? If Leonard goes out and has a loan for 6 months and does well, comes back, then he is still 24, the youngest midfielder Blues have got. Tommy Doyle, the situation with Wolves is very much an unknown now, with them probably coming back down to the Championship. And if Blues don't go up, then that is kind of up in the air. And then you've got Peck, who will be 29 by the end of the season. You've got Awata, who will also be 29 and maybe transition permanently to right back by that stage. So, yeah, the door, could very much be open for Mark Leonard to make a comeback into Birmingham City. So I wouldn't hastily sign off on a permanent transfer. I think a loan would suit best this month.
Where are we with Lewis Koumas? I know we've covered Dykes quite a lot. It does seem that Dykes is very likely to leave in this window. Where are we with Lewis Koumas?
Again, a month ago, I'd have said 100% he's going to be recalled by Liverpool at the start of the month and be put elsewhere in the Championship. But because of the injury to Damari Gray, because of how Lewis Koumas played against Coventry and got his first goal, I think it's still open. That's the impression I've been getting from Chris Davies, the impression I got from Lewis Koumas when I spoke to him after the Cambridge game. Koumas hasn't been happy with the amount that he's played. He's only made 5 Championship starts. He wanted to have a real impact on a Championship season here at Birmingham City, and it hasn't quite happened. But with Gray out until next month, we believe, there's still 4 games to play in January. There's still 3 games to play before January 24th, isn't there? So he has got, or January 26th, he's got a big chance over these next 3 games to really stake a claim and show that he can be a big player for Birmingham City in the second half of the season. If that's not going to be the case, then he's still got a week left of the transfer window to make something else happen, hasn't he, and move somewhere else. So it feels open, mainly I think because Blues haven't got the options in the wide positions at the moment for Chris Davies to turn around and say, okay, Lewis, you're not going to play for the rest of this season. You're not going to play enough. You should go back and do something else. It feels open. Koumas seems quite content with where he's at in his position. And I think we're just going to have to watch the next couple of games and see how it goes, really.
Brilliant. Anything to add? The only thing we've got down left on the running order is other positions being looked at. We've sort of talked around that in terms of left-sided centre-backs. Anything you want to add on that, or other positions, or the Dykes situation?
No. Dykes is kind of clear-cut. I don't see any route back for him. I think he's going to have to find a move before the end of the window. I'm just surprised that Chris Davies kind of counted out these players. He could have kept them around, but instead he's kind of cast them to one side and decided not to use them while this is ongoing. So I expect Dykes to leave. Other departures, Fujimoto, I think if he wants to go, will be allowed to leave, as far as I'm aware. Other than that, Blues can't really let too many go, because they're going to be players that are needed at least until the end of this month, when we see the picture and what it's like. Yeah, indeed. And the other thing to say, I suppose, is Bright Sayer Samuel will be returning at some point, seems to his Nigeria side in the semi-finals of the Africa Cup of Nations. So good luck to him. Alex, thank you very much. Thank you all for listening or watching. Appreciate your time and interest very much. Do hit like, subscribe, or leave a comment. And from both of us, it's a big keep right on.